Hello everyone, it's great to be here to talk about what we hope will be a really interesting discussion talking about the future of technology. What we'd like to do is start off by introducing our panelists, but I guess very briefly, I'm Simon Fenton, I'm Deputy Principal of Escape Studios. I come initially from a long time ago, come from a video games background. Could we start off with Wayne? You're the first person on my side, so it'd be great for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hey folks, yeah, I'm Wayne Powell from D&B Audio Technica. I'm Artist Relations here. So if you haven't heard of us, you've certainly heard us. We're the world's leading sound technology company. So we look after Coldplay's World Tour, Lady Gaga, Taylor Swift, that's ours. And we also look after places like Wembley Stadium. But actually, as the future progresses, we're kind of finding ourselves overlapping more and more with experiences and visuals. And so we're kind of created a space in London to kind of collaborate and work out what the future looks like. And that's where my colleague Martin comes in.
Great, fantastic, really exciting stuff. Just Saint, you're next in my view. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm St. John Walker. I am currently the program leader for postgraduate media at University of Hertfordshire, another fine institution like Escape Studios. And previous, and I guess that's why I'm on here, is because I was Dean of Industry Engagement at Escape Studios in prehistory. I now classed as a VFX educationalist, I believe, and that's because I do things like I chair the industry panels for the London International Animation Festival, bringing on board industry to talk and debate various key issues. I've also chaired FMX, the VFX Festival, and the View Conference, and I'm also author of the Core Skills of VFX Handbook, which is currently being re-edited and updated for the 21st century and our immersive future. So I'm doing that with the likes of Framestore, CineSite, and a number of other companies. So that's me.
Well, that's great. I look forward to that. Thank you. Martin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. Hi there, my name is Martin Monov, and I'm the commercialization manager for D&B Solutions. Like Wayne mentioned, Wayne is representing D&B Audio Technica, which is our partner and our sister company, audio equipment, whereas I'm looking over the system integrator arm under D&B Solutions. As a result, Wayne alluded that we are currently developing and have developed an immersive that kind of pass under my remit. So it's great to meet you all, and I'm looking forward to discussing a little bit more.
Great, great. On my bottom left, that is Dan Shutt. Do you want to say hello, Dan? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Dan. I teach the Masters VFX course at Escape, but I've been in VFX in some form for, I think this is my 31st year. So 31 years. So over that time, worked in many different areas, kind of TV and film, various bits and pieces, also games back in the day. And now I have a bit of a side hustle where I'm doing a lot of kind of live events, installation work, a lot of interactive stuff using kind of sensors and things like that. So I guess that's why I'm here.
Great, nice one. And finally, last but not least, of course, is Lee. Do you want to tell us who you are, Lee?
Hi guys, Lee Danskin, Chief Technology Officer at Escape Technology, which once upon a time was part of Escape Studios. About 10 years ago, we got sidelined out. I've been doing it just a little bit longer than Dan, probably about 35, 36 years. I started out at a small company called Alias Research, which probably means nothing to loads of people, but I was predate the PC, Silicon Graphics with Power Animator, and I was on the Maya development team. So I go back a long way. doing graphics. So, and I've been in games, film, VFX, long form, short form. If they do it, we've done it, AR, VR, and Escape is a solutions integrator. And we talk to companies at ILM one end and a one-man band at the other end. So I'll leave it there. That's enough for me.
Nice. That's a lot. We've got some heritage going on here.
Heritage, yes.
Yeah, heritage. And yeah, I mean, I started, my first software was Alias version 5, way back when, yes. So we've got a fantastic host of luminaries here from audio, from education, immersive, and of course technology. So I'm hoping we're going to have a really interesting discussion about the future of technology, which is, as we know, ever changing. But it'd be great to start to kind of talk about the challenges that you guys have faced, or some interesting things that you think are developing in terms of creating immersive experiences. You know, as the world of video and audio have changed, you know, we're getting the kind of quality you might see in film, in kind of immersive experiences in many different forms. So it'd be great to get a sense of what you think those challenges are, or the challenges you've faced. Perhaps we start off with maybe Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big kind of, not really a challenge, but actually something that's really freed us up recently, well, not that recently, but is the ability to interact with stuff. You know, a lot of the stuff that I was doing a while ago, we would do pre-rendered. Obviously now we have real time to be able to do everything kind of on the fly. So instead of rendering out for hours and hours a stage setup and then being able to mix various pieces in and things like that, I'm now able to actually almost set it up like a little computer game where I can turn lights on and make things come out and do things like that. So that's very freeing, but obviously the challenge now is also kind of bringing that there's a lot of technology that all has to talk to each other in order to do a lot of these things. So sometimes when we're doing, say, an immersive experience, we're working with multiple pieces of software, multiple pieces of hardware. They all have to talk to each other. So there are protocols, things like OSC, that we can send information through that will allow one random piece of software to talk to another random piece of software, and then being able to kind of get those two to kind of work together and then be able to kind of output. So normally we'll have one piece of software that does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of processing, and then the other one will do all of the pretty stuff that just looks cool.
Yeah, sounds great. So I guess for DB Solutions, you probably have similar challenges.
Yes, so one of the biggest challenges have been how can we adopt XR technology on a wider scale? Because you know, a little bit as part of our history is we develop broadcast studios and we do XR stages. And one of those products that we have developed is called Smart Stage. And as part of the Smart Stage development, we realized that obviously traditional broadcasters, they tend to go with custom XR products, which kind of, from a company's perspective, we were looking, how can we develop out of the box product? So what we've looked into heavily over the last several years is automation and creative control. A lot of the times, a lot of our clients, they tend to be corporates or educational institutions such as yourself. We find it difficult to source the right talents, and as a result, we've really automated certain processes. You know, we've created quite a few good custom UIs, kind of removing the need necessarily of having on-hands technical stuff and having a plethora of, you know, technicians. Now, it does come with certain changes, and as every product, it does evolve. So I guess like what I'm trying to allude is that a lot of the work that initially we were trying to look and source talent, we are focusing on automating at the moment. Yeah.
So Wayne, are you, in terms of audio, are you finding that you're having to adapt to new experiences and continually change what you do?
Yeah, do you know, I've not quite hit the 30-year mark, but nearly there. So I've nearly 30 years in this industry, and I want to be one of those grumpy old men that doesn't like change. and keep things, keep things analog and simple. But actually, just to touch on that word immersive that you use, Simon,
Yeah.
it's one of those words that gets banded around, and it means everything and nothing all at
Yeah.
once. But I think one of the biggest changes I've seen is maybe 20 years ago, if especially at a live event or an experience, you could kind of rock up and video and lighting and sound could all live in their own little bubbles. But for things to be really good nowadays, it's not just this, it's not just hardware and software that need to interact. Everyone in that creative process needs to be talking nice and early. So 20 years ago, you could turn up and the sound would be an add-on, or the visuals or the lighting would be an add-on. And that kind of, just it's not just software that needs to communicate. People have to communicate to make it as cohesive, as good as it can be.
Yeah. So there's a real, it sounds like there's a real challenge there for connecting different technologies together, and people understanding how to use them. Is that something you found with Escape technology, where you're having to find new solutions as like real-time and immersive stuff develops?
It's an interesting, I mean, the bigger one for us, obviously, we sort of, we work in games, we work in film, we work in all these locations, and there's a lot of interop, but most of that is ironed out generally as part of the design process of whatever you're trying to deliver. So, the newer technologies, the primary one, or the primary problem that we're beginning to see is just data sets, just raw, as soon as Nanite came along, it was like, hey, look at us, we can just build what we like and go crazy, and everybody goes mental. And then, we've now got a 5090 with 32 gigs of VRAM, not 24, on a 4090, and everybody's like, wow, this is crazy. And then we've got new products coming out at some time soon. So you're going to have the Blackwell B6000 and all that sort of stuff. So I think joining up products is, we don't see that as much of a blocker anymore. I mean, there are, yes, there's every now and again something won't want to connect somewhere, but there's always an alternative. The bigger problem that we always see is actually just feeding the beast, because you've got a lot of data and you're trying to load it into scenes. And if you're doing virtual scouting, or the other one is round tripping in virtual productions, which always makes me smile these days, where it's like, hey, we've loaded up this monster big set into Unreal, and it's on a 48 gig Ada 6000, and it's got loads of memory, and we've got lots of textures. And then it's like, director walks in and says, let's move everything to the left or to the right, or can you change the size of the moon, and whatever. And then someone goes, yeah, can we just get all of that back into Houdini, please? And it's like, that's an interesting set of problems and requirements. So I think for me, the elephant in the room always is that the data we're generating just gets bigger, and that sort of affects the devices that you're trying to connect together as well, because suddenly it's like, hey, this little RJ45 Cat6e Ethernet cable's not really going to do the data sets. It's not going to cut it anymore.
Yeah, it's not going to cut it.
Most of the devices generally suffer from the fact that it's brilliant. We're just trying to do way more than we've ever done through an immersive environment, whether it's a virtual production stage, whether it's AR, VR, XR, whichever way. People are beginning to sort of realize there are sort of limitations with VRAM, and it's like, how many polygons can we actually move, before we have to switch to Nanite? And if we are switching to Nanite, how much do we break it by going that route? And how many hoops and jumps have I got to jump over? So for me, it's the data thing that seems to break most of these things. A bit like audio as well, getting the right sort of bandwidth on your audio.
The quality, yeah. Saint, what do you think the challenges are in terms of education, dealing with these new technologies?
Well, I think there's playing on a few things that Wayne and Lee have said. I think sort of first of all, the very term immersive is now up for grabs. It doesn't really fit as a separate thing. It's unsiloed, and it should be. And I think it'll only start to really take off when it becomes more invisible. kind of weird way. I mean, there's that great phrase, the pictures are always better on the radio, you know, meaning that sort of it's what happens in your head rather than the bandwidth. That is the important thing. And I think what we've seen with VR in particular is the kind of how encumbered it is. And it's never really taken off VR in a big way because everybody hates being encumbered, being by some technology. And so I think that makes it very difficult for education. In terms of education, we're moving away now from teaching, and again, this goes back to a point, the hybrid point I think Lee might have made. We're moving away from teaching particular pieces of software to teaching workflows and pipeline. They're the important thing now. People come to us who already have, you know, a great 3D knowledge, but they don't know how to use that and harness that in a sort of in a workflow, which is, you know, look at any film, look at any game. It's made by a city of people all working in a networked way. So I think that's a big challenge for education, which likes its boxes, it likes its different courses. I think the elephant in the room as well is Gen Z. Let's talk about Gen Z. Lee,
that's brave.
There's
a lot of elephants in this room.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm going to mention the probably a big elephant, and that is that Gen Z are concerned about ecology and sustainability, and as the elephant that Lee mentioned and was feeding is you know, storage, the huge amount of backlash that's becoming to the ecology of storing crypto, the amount of water that's needed for AI to cool down the servers, etc. And I think that's something that education has to work with industry about as well, because a lot of Gen Z are moving away from technology because of that, and especially from AI. And the last point I'll make, and then I'll let you go, and that is that education these days, it used to be about digital natives, right? We're all talking about digital natives. These students who are coming in who lived and were born in the digital era. Now we're talking about students who are coming in who are spatial natives. They know how to use 3D. Lee probably remembers, and Dan, I'm sure, used to remember the conferences back in the day when you'd have a conference about the new tools, and there'd always be somebody who goes, which is better, 3D Max or Maya? And that was the only question they ever got asked. But nowadays, you know, the students come with an expertise in that already, and they need to understand workflows and not the 3D so much. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's really, really interesting. And we'll definitely, definitely, maybe, we definitely will come back to AI, I'm sure, by the end of this session. I think it'd probably be good for folks watching to get some kind of context of maybe when we talk about immersive. You're right, it is a really, really broad term. But maybe we could have a look at Dan's work, see an example of what Dan's kind of done in terms of technology and interaction, and also to see the kind of stuff that's been done by D&B Solutions and iTech and wristband. Is that something we can do now?
Cool. Yeah.
That was seamless.
Yeah. So do you want me to explain a little bit of context with this as well? So yeah, we do a lot of kind of. I do a lot of interactive installation things. We use a lot of sensors and various kind of 3D softwares. So things like Touch Designer for doing processing, using Notch for a lot of the pretty stuff. Also some Unreal Engine. One of the pieces that you'll see in a second, we started off in Notch and then realized it wasn't really capable of doing what we needed, so we had to move it to a full game engine. But yeah,
can I just, for the people who might not know who are watching this, what's Notch?
Right, Notch.
Unreal Engine.
Okay. So Notch is probably it's kind of a bit of an unsung hero, and it's picking up a lot more now. But essentially, it's used a lot in kind of interactive installation, but also live events. You can also use it just in the same way that you would use Cinema 4D and pre-render stuff. So sometimes I'll even do, use it for that. For instance, I did, well, this was last year, but did some visuals for Pendulum. And again, one of the nice things about working with a software like that, Notch is essentially all of the cool stuff that you have in Cinema 4D mixed with all the cool stuff that you have in After Effects, and you can have it all together. So I was able to build an entire stage, light it, have things happen on the stage, animate the lights and have things moving around, things like that. And then also be able to, at the same time, render out from multiple cameras and then rebuild that out for the LED map that would go out to the LED screen. So it kind of does all of the compositing and the 3D. And basically, I could also, even though it was pre-rendered, I would also be able to plug in a MIDI controller, so I could, move lights and things myself. Gives you a lot of control. So we're using a lot more of that these days. But sometimes for interactive installations, I'll use Notch for that. But if you need really heavy lifting, sometimes you need like cleverer logic, then something like Unreal is probably
Unreal is the way forward. So you're basically a digital wizard. That's what we've established.
Yeah, I do bits and pieces.
Yeah. So is it possible to have a look at this now? Is it something we can do?
If you got the video. So I'll talk you through some of these. So these are just early tests of kind of, by the way, this is a project that we did for the Science Museum. We did it with Framestore and with a company called Creative Giants. So what you're seeing here are just initial tests of a kind of a flocking effect that we were creating. So the idea was what people would be conversing with alien life forms. So this was for the science fiction exhibition at Science Museum. So these alien life forms, you'd walk in, we had LiDAR sensors that would allow you to kind of track the people in the room. We'd have these life forms kind of come around and kind of fly around you. So what you're seeing now, this is actually the final thing that was projected into the environment. So these life forms would move around a person. They'd be able to split up if there were multiple people in the room. And then the final part that you'll see in a second is after a while, once they'd sort of finished following you around, they would kind of lock themselves in place based on where you were standing and then begin building like it was almost kind of like a mandala, which would build from this. So every kind of mandala that was created would be different because of where people would be standing. So you can see here, this is where people would be standing in a certain place, and this mandala would draw itself, and then kind of they'd go away, and another bunch of people would come in and interact with the life forms as well. So it was basically like a little two-way conversation you were having with the life forms.
Wow, very cool.
There you go. This is the just a small bit of footage from when it was actually in the space. So you can see there's a lot more in this one because we had more people in the space that it was following.
How much testing do you get to do when setting this up? What in terms of the kind of, yeah.
That was kind of interesting because like that early test, the first test, it was something I whipped up in Maya and there was nothing interactive about it. The second test that you saw, that was done in Notch, and actually that was interactive. You could move things around and it would flock. The third test we did, they wanted proof that we would be able to track people. So we created a tracking. We didn't have the LiDAR at that point, so we used depth cameras to track points in space. We did literally took it into Framestore, had this little Connect camera and sort of dumped it down and said, okay, we can move these little cups around and these things will flock around them. So we did that. And then the final testing we actually did in the basement of the Science Museum, where we essentially brought all the LiDAR scanners together and we did a full-size test of it. And then the final 2 nights where we were actually installing it, that was the terrifying part, where basically if anything can go wrong, it will definitely go wrong. And everything that worked perfectly up to that point definitely then goes wrong. And then you have to deal with and fix all those issues before it goes live.
Yeah.
Cool.
Fascinating.
And there's,
it looks beautiful.
Thank you. But there's a second one of my latest piece that we've been doing. So the second video is, I'll let this run actually. Cool. So this piece, this was an installation that used people's EEG kind of brainwaves, essentially. So it read your brainwaves and then took you on a journey through the different brainwaves. So we've got kind of, you know, alpha, which is your kind of resting waveform, and delta, which is your deep sleep kind of meditation. And basically it took you through all these different waveforms, and then at the end it would bring you all together to do kind of a group meditation that would kind of open up this big portal at the very end and kind of finish the experience. But again, working with EEGs was very, very tricky, because I don't know if anybody's ever used them, but they're really messy. Like the information you get from EEGs is just very, very noisy, and you have to do quite a lot to kind of get a clean signal out, something that can be used.
Wow. So, I mean, that's really about, you know, being innovative. Is kind of trying to find, it's basically problem solving with all these different interconnected bits of technology to create an experience. And in that instance there, did people feel uncomfortable, you know, saying earlier on we were talking about VR and people feeling a bit uncomfortable about wearing a VR helmet, you know, for people to kind of wear sensors and then see the impact of kind of what's going on in their body in real time, looks really, really engaging. I mean, that looks very beautiful. It'd be good to get a kind of a sense for, like you guys at D&B Solutions, have you got, I know you've got a video that you could potentially show. I think it's nice to be able to show some context. Is that possible? We can roll that? Roll that, that sounds official. Wow, cool.
So this is one of the reasons why we have our experience center. It's not just a showroom. It's actually sometimes for us to kind of try things out, or like kind of find new ideas, you almost need a reason. You need a project. So
Yeah.
I worked with the team at iTech and Wristband, who they've got a very different approach to mixed reality. They use the Pico headsets to take the audience on a journey in a virtual reality, but then halfway through, they use the pass-through camera to present a live musician on stage. And so we're using iTech to kind of experiment, but we're actually taking it to South by Southwest in a couple of weeks. And it's a really interesting kind of way of kind of crossing over from that reality to unreality. They make sure the camera is suitably rubbish to just help blend that kind of, is that band real or not? But from a pragmatic point of view, one of the reasons we started the conversation was that sense of I'm always thinking about the audience and what they're doing, and folks having headsets on and headphones on, they're automatically isolated. So you're missing out on that sense of community and that shared experience. And I love the idea of these sort of marginal gains, you know, then that's really where immersives kind of gets really good. And so we used a 360 audio system, the ENB Soundscape. And that way we could take away the headphones and allow folks to feel like there's a sense of a shared experience from an audio point of view. But actually also by doing this, we kind of found that actually audio can help solve some problems. So the folks at Wristband would normally spend a couple of minutes helping people navigate how to use gestures and head movements to control their journey.
Yeah.
Which seems it's a bit of a rubbish way. It feels like you're on a plane and just being told like going through the safety procedure. So what we did is we used a bit of clever sound design to start making folks in the audience turn their head and look around and help them navigate how to use the headset without them really being told how to use the headset. So sometimes you just these spaces are great because sometimes you just need to. It's almost like a play date. You just need to put some kit in and have a reason to kind of try a few things out.
Yeah, I mean, it looked absolutely fantastic. I'd love to have a go on that. I've had a little experience of the smart stage, and the audio is, you know, and the ability, you know, the spatial nature of the audio is absolutely exceptional. I think there's something that's really kind of important is that people, a range of different people who aren't necessarily tech savvy, you've got to be able to, for them to engage with this and not be put off and understand kind of how to use it straight away. I think that kind of takes us on nicely to talk about how, when you're combining visuals and audio, what are the kind of major challenges that you're facing in terms of people understanding the interactive spaces they're working in? Because, you know, everyone, when they go to a cinema, they watch a film, they know exactly what to do. But as you're saying, guiding people to kind of when they've got, i.e. spatial computing on, or they're able to look through, or with, like Dan, you were saying, where people just not quite sure how to work with stuff. How do you go about kind of explaining the journey?
I think that's almost like that's one of the delicious challenges is the future of events or experiences for audiences. You know, the days where everyone walks into a room and faces the same way, looking at the stage, and that's where everything happens, are disappearing. So there's our nice challenge. How do we use lighting and video and sound, you know, and where do people look? Is kind of is open now, and that's almost like part of the adventure, I think. Does that answer your question? I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely, it really does. No, it's a great answer. And I think probably that takes us nicely onto the challenges of earlier on. We were talking about data and the kind of sheer amount of processing, which, you know, this stuff is only getting ever more complex. So where do you think, I'm going to ask that really awful question, where do we think that AI comes into this? You know, terrible question where everyone goes, oh, I'm not quite sure, but it's going to change a lot. But what do you see that doing to the landscape of how we use the technology? What's the impacts on the hardware and the software? Lee, do you have a kind of sense of where this might go?
It's one of those ones where, you know, Just on the audio thing, there's some digital twin stuff that's been done with, directed spatial audio to get people to look around environments as well. Just, it's not that loose term immersive. I get really, immersive sort of, everybody thinks you have to have something on your head. And it's like, well, I don't quite agree with that anymore. Immersive can be, there's things like Lightfield Labs. I don't know if anybody's taken a good look at their big monitor stuff that's still coming. There's a lot of work there. Maybe face everybody in the same direction, but get a very different experience when that actually comes out at scale. But for us, the whole with DLSS, the latest version, what it's doing, when you look at frame rates with and without, and how many pixels it's filling in, you start to question, well, okay, how far can machine learning go in a real-time environment to that level? I'm not a great lover of stable diffusion with a lovely comfy UI front end. It's sort of like for people who don't want to learn Photoshop and just want to type shit. So I get quite emotional about comfy UI and stable diffusion. So just rocking that out there, just to see how much of an argument that causes. But if you're talking about up-resing or taking a low-res thing, and it sort of comes back to rendering and triangles and quads and all that good stuff. And we've already got Nanite from the Unreal boys that are sort of like, right, we can't draw that many triangles that quick enough anymore. Again, the data sets are affecting the redraw times. So to get around the problem, OpenGL, we had, if anybody's old enough, there was a product called Clarice that was heavily used by DNEG. They got rid of their OpenGL viewport because it was too slow to deal with the polygon count at the time. So it was a renderer. So for me, Nanite is kind of on that trajectory. So, it's very much, we're not looking at polygons and triangles anymore. We're actually just looking at how we draw pixels. Well, Stable Diffusion is really good at drawing pixels. So, when you start thinking, actually, if I'm rendering at low res and there's an underlying or overlying, AI that's up-resing it and doing a lot of the filling in. So take DLSS and sort of times by 10, I think AI will fill in a lot more gaps than people realize that it might do in the future. It's not only making up pixels, eventually it will be making up quality, it will be making up, oh, these are supposed to be trees, right? I'll make them trees, rather than actually just interfering with pixels. So it depends on how far you go. I don't, at the minute, the video generators, 4 seconds, 5 seconds long, and they've all got horses with 3 legs or people with 10 lots of fingers or, on each hand. So, they've still got quite a way to go to fix those things. But I think taking low res things and up-resing them, AI will definitely, we're already seeing it, so, to get a frame rate on a 4090 or a 5090 to anything reasonable, on some of these newer games with the data sets that we're sort of talking about, you're reaching the limits of how quickly you can draw those polygons. So at that point, you're using DLSS to fill in the blanks. Taking that to the logical next conclusion, let's not actually bother drawing polygons anyway. We'll just render it in real time. So that whole difference of moving from polys and quads to actually just rendering the pixels, because the pixels are finitely, there's only so many on a screen. And if each one can be rendered in real time, then I don't need to worry about polygons and quads and triangles anymore. That's a thing of the past.
It's the stuff of science fiction, isn't it? It really is.
Well, Project Arena from Chaos Group, which is their virtual production product, comes out of Project Lavina, which became Vantage. It's a real-time renderer. It's not doing polygons and triangles anymore. You're actually doing virtual production with a renderer. And that's kind of, that sort of fundamental leap where we start doing really weird and wonderful things.
So that probably leads us on nicely to Saint. With this incredibly ever-changing world of technology, what do you recommend for students who are interested in, where do they go? What do they do in terms of like looking at new technologies, and the impacts on the kind of skills and pipelines?
That was Simon's mic drop moment. Fill that blank.
Yeah.
Well, I think first of all, just to give a bit of sort of context, I know there's a lot of people who are unnerved, especially students at the moment, unnerved about what's happening in the industry. A lot of people at schools, for instance, are deciding that they're not going to go into VFX or animation because the robots will be doing it anyway, etc., etc. All uninformed, but nevertheless, there is a real sort of lack of confidence in the industry, and we've seen, Technicolor closing, and we've seen Axis animation a while ago as well. So it's a time when everybody's a bit uncertain and a bit sort of frazzled. And I think that's an issue. And I think we can also look at what happened with virtual production and virtual production stages and volumes. And originally the idea, they were going to be everywhere, and the Warner's was huge. That's now closed down, and but what this tells us, I think, is that it's when the DIY homebrew lots, the independent artists, the people who are more inventive get hold of this technology. And I saw some amazing inventive stuff with people were doing with virtual without huge stages and multi-million dollar stuff. And I think that's the way things are going to go. And I think in terms of students and education, what we have to get used to is the idea that we're teaching young people to be conductors, not musicians. And what I mean by that is that they have to, as I said, put together workflows. They have to direct creatives and different pieces of software. And what AI will do is it'll create a lot more task-based software that you string together, rather than this bloatware, these big programs that you buy and you subscribe to, and they're huge and they do everything. I think where we're going is there's going to be a lot more sort of fleet of foot, nimble piece of software that you, as an artist, have to put together. And I think the last thing I'll say, which is probably going to be even more unpopular than AI, and that is we talked about sort of how the technology sometimes has to be invisible before people will engage with it. I wonder what's going to happen with Neuralink. And Dan was talking there about sort of taking sort of various sort of sensors from the human body. But I wonder if people will start to want the invisibility of media so much that they'll have some kind of implant in the future. But that's probably not for this week or next week. And the last thing, it's interesting today that, seeing Dan's amazing stuff. Here we are in this 2D Zoom world. We can't really engage, and Dan has to go through this rigmarole of documenting and showing us what it was, and we have to imagine what it was. And the promise of the metaverse was, what will happen in the future is Dan will be able to take us into that space, and all the audience will go with him, and we'll have the metaverse, and we'll be able to enter into that space and really know what it's like. So that's what I think needs to happen. We need to education has this part to re-educate everybody, but we need the tools, and the tools are going to be through AI, are going to be task-based, and you as a conductor will string them together to make the creative output that you want.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And you used the word there, which I want to kind of probably, I'm not sure in terms of time, but not end up there, but you said the word artist. And I think, we've got to remember that whatever, we started the conversation off there was some humble bragging about who's been doing this longest. I didn't bring it with me, I'm cross with myself. I had a list of all the different pieces of software I've used in my career. And it's like the Elements Graveyard, starting off with, I think it was Softimage version 2 or 3, and Alias, and Wavefront, and you name it. So, and the thing is, art and design and technology, they're just ever, at the end of the day, we're the people, right? Well, we are people, all of us. But, we're the ones who are making the decisions and using this technology to create the technology and software. So I think for my part, I know people get a bit concerned about machine learning and AI generally, but it is a tool, and it will be a tool to help us do, more stuff.
I think more than that. Go on.
Go for it, Sam.
I was just going to say, more than that, I think it's a tool maker, and that's an important sort of string to the artist's bow. They can make their own tools as well.
Yeah,
I think something that you've all hit on is that for me, you've mentioned the metaverse, and obviously digital twins and all that sort of stuff is going to be part of that metaverse in the long term, and it is having that capability of interacting without a headset. And there's I don't know if you've seen there's a display company called Voxon.co. Please check it out. Check out Voxon.co. It's a volumetric 3D display, so you can actually, we would be able to look at what Dan had done in a 3D volume and actually sit around it and look at it. You know, at the minute it's very low res, but as with anything that started out that was low res, it soon becomes very not low res. And, you know, things like, you know, Gaussian splatting and the stuff that we're doing there, which is changing. Again, triangles and quads only go so far. You know, the point cloud and, you know, products like Neuralize that was acquired by Sony for their virtual production was a very impressive product. And Gaussian splatting now becoming the new, you know, we can render it in V-Ray now. You know, there's a lot of stuff there, and obviously reality capture acquired by the Unreal guys again. You know, we're doing a lot of digitization, not creation from the ground up. And you've got Lightfield Labs. I think there's technologies coming along now that will not only change the way that we interact with 3D environments. You know, a headset was, you know, an intermediate way of doing things, but obviously these large voxel displays and light field displays, the amount of data you need to push at these things again, you know, starts going through the roof even more than we are currently. You know, so you are, you know, for light field displays, you're sending like 60 streams of video at a display wall the size of this at the minute, you know, but at some point it will scale up and it will go crazy. But I don't think that we've really touched the surface on new hardware that's going to come along that won't be headset based, that will be volumetric based. You know, the Star Wars chess pieces, that's what Voxon.co is, you know, but very low res at this moment in time, but it will come, it will come.
Yeah, very, very exciting. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I'll definitely check that out. I would love to play Star Wars chess. That would be fantastic.